Widmark wasn't just another familiar face from classic Hollywood. He was one of the defining forces of the Golden Age, a man whose performances carved fear, tension, and raw truth into the screen. Yet behind that legendary reputation lay a private reckoning few ever knew about. Before his death, Widmark quietly revealed a list of people he despised, actors he believed embodied the darkest side of Hollywood's so-called golden era. These were not ordinary names, but power brokers, untouchable icons the world had worshipped for decades. So who were they, and why did Widmark feel compelled to expose them before his final curtain fell? Look closely, because this wasn't bitterness. It was a final warning. And at the top of that list stood Elia Kazan. A betrayal Widmark would never forgive. The break between Richard Widmark and Elia Kazan didn't happen gradually. It occurred in a single, irreversible moment, the moment Kazan chose to speak. In the early 1950s, Hollywood was submerged in fear. Careers disappeared overnight. Scripts were destroyed. Friendships turned into liabilities. Everyone understood the unspoken rule: keep your head down, protect one another, survive together. Kazan shattered that code when he appeared before the House Un-American Activities Committee and named fellow artists as communists. For Widmark, that decision erased everything that came before. Kazan wasn't just another director in his eyes. He was a collaborator, a man Widmark believed understood the silent contract between artists, that whatever storms raged outside the studio, loyalty inside it was non-negotiable. When Kazan testified, Widmark felt that contract collapse. The hostility was immediate and permanent. Widmark didn't argue on talk shows or issue public condemnations. He chose something colder. He erased Kazan from his life entirely. Friends noticed Widmark refusing to speak his name at all. When Kazan came up in conversation, Widmark would change the subject or fall silent. One longtime associate later recalled Widmark saying flatly, "I don't work with men who sell out other men." The message was unmistakable. Kazan no longer deserved acknowledgement. In private, Widmark distilled his contempt into a single line that quietly spread through Hollywood: "There are things worse than losing work. Losing your spine is one of them." The meaning was clear. Widmark believed Kazan hadn't just saved his career, he had sacrificed something far more valuable. In Widmark's eyes, Kazan did something even worse than testifying. He normalized betrayal as a form of survival. His testimony sent a dangerous message through Hollywood, that fear could excuse the destruction of others. That belief only hardened when Kazan later defended himself publicly, insisting he had done what was necessary. To Widmark, that justification confirmed everything. He once told a friend, "The moment you justify it, you guarantee you'll do it again." Years later, when Kazan received an honorary Academy Award in 1999, the room famously split between applause and silence. Widmark's stance, however, had been fixed for decades. Time didn't soften the act in his mind, it only made its damage clearer. To him, Kazan became a cautionary tale, proof that Hollywood's golden age didn't decay because of outsiders, but because insiders chose themselves over everyone else. And that was a sin Richard Widmark never forgave. And the second name on his list cut even deeper: John Wayne. A humiliation Widmark never forgot. If there was one man whose presence could instantly freeze Richard Widmark, it was John Wayne, not because Wayne lacked talent, but because he represented the kind of unchecked power Widmark despised more than anything in Hollywood. The tension first ignited during the early days of The Alamo in 1960, a film John Wayne didn't merely star in, but ruled. Wayne was the producer, the final authority, the man no one dared to challenge. When Richard Widmark's name was floated for the role of Jim Bowie, Wayne shut it down on the spot. In front of the crew, without hesitation, he dismissed Widmark with a remark that sounded casual, but landed like a blade. "You're not big enough to play Jim Bowie." For Widmark, that moment wasn't just an insult, it was a warning. It perfectly captured everything he despised about the rigid power structure of old Hollywood. Wayne wasn't judging talent or performance. He was asserting dominance. The Alamo was Wayne's kingdom, and Widmark was being deliberately reminded of his place within it. Widmark didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He responded with just 2 words, "I will be." That quiet defiance proved far more dangerous than open confrontation. When the film was released, critics did the unthinkable. Many praised Widmark's Jim Bowie as more complex, more human, and ultimately more compelling than Wayne's own performance. Wayne never acknowledged it publicly. From that moment on, whatever relationship existed between the 2 men went cold. Later, Widmark made it clear to those close to him that his resentment was never personal, it was philosophical. He believed Wayne wielded power to silence rather than to elevate. In Widmark's view, authority was meant to protect the craft, not suffocate it. From then on, he avoided Wayne whenever possible, choosing distance over submission. No shared projects. No words of praise. To Widmark, John Wayne became living proof that in Hollywood's golden age, talent didn't always prevail, power did. The third name on Widmark's list surprised many, Frank Sinatra. And the reason wasn't jealousy, it was disrespect. Their tension came into sharp focus during The Detective in 1968, when Sinatra arrived on set with the confidence of an untouchable icon. He showed up late. He shortened rehearsals. He pushed to wrap scenes as quickly as possible. To Sinatra, efficiency meant control. To Widmark, it meant compromise. Crew members noticed the contrast immediately. Widmark arrived early, his script marked, blocking memorized, ready to repeat takes until the scene truly worked. Sinatra, by contrast, relied on charm and authority, expecting the production to bend around him. For a while, it did, until it didn't. The breaking point came when Sinatra asked to rush through a scene Widmark had meticulously prepared. It wasn't a collaborative request. It was an assumption. And for Widmark, that crossed a line. It was taken for granted. Widmark complied in the moment, then quietly withdrew. No arguments, no drama, just a visible shift that everyone on set could feel. Later, Widmark summed up his judgment with surgical precision: "Charm is not commitment." The line spread quietly among crew members and peers. It wasn't a jab. It was a verdict. Widmark believed Sinatra treated acting as just another appointment on his calendar, not an obligation. In Widmark's world, that was unforgivable. Sinatra never addressed the tension publicly. He didn't need to. His status protected him. Studios adjusted. Scenes bent. And that ecosystem was exactly what Widmark rejected. He believed a film set was a collective effort, not a throne room. There was no reconciliation after filming. They didn't seek each other out. Years later, when asked about colleagues, Widmark praised dedication and preparation, never Sinatra. The omission said everything. He opted out. He denied Sinatra the one currency he valued most: respect. The fourth name on Widmark's list was Marlon Brando, the chaos Widmark called a lie. On paper, Richard Widmark and Marlon Brando should have stood on the same side of Hollywood history. Both were hailed as serious actors. Both carried reputations for intensity that unsettled co-stars. To outsiders, they looked like kindred spirits. But that illusion collapsed the moment Widmark observed how Brando actually worked. At the height of his fame, Brando's methods were legendary. He refused to memorize lines, relying instead on cue cards hidden around the set, taped to lamps, furniture, even to other actors. Richard Widmark moved through Hollywood with an intensity few dared to match, but even he had his limits. Marlon Brando, for all the praise heaped upon him, was a disruptor in Widmark's eyes. Brando improvised without warning, rewrote scenes mid-take, and forced everyone around him to chase his erratic rhythm. The industry called it genius. Widmark called it chaos. He listened to co-stars, directors, and crew recount productions where Brando's brilliance came at the expense of everyone else's focus. Where others saw daring, Widmark saw selfishness. When Brando's name surfaced in a room full of praise, Widmark remained silent, until he finally spoke, cutting through the admiration like a scalpel. "Some actors need chaos to create. I prefer focus." The message landed immediately. Acting, to Widmark, was a disciplined ode to the story and to those sharing the frame. Brando's methods, which forced others to absorb his uncertainty, were unacceptable. Widmark never feuded publicly. His rejection was quieter, colder. He refused to praise Brando, avoided discussions where his name appeared, and silently observed as Brando's career faltered under unpredictability. To Widmark, it was vindication. Then there was Kirk Douglas, a different kind of storm. Douglas carried ambition and intensity like a physical weight, and the industry assumed pairing him with Widmark would spark magic. What they didn't predict was that some fire burns everything around it. Douglas didn't wait for moments, he took them. He shouted dialogue louder than written, stretched emotional beats, and encroached on camera framing to dominate every scene. When directors tried to rein him in, Douglas reportedly snapped, "If you want small, hire someone else. I don't do small." Widmark noticed. He understood that this was more than ego, it was an unwillingness to share the craft, a refusal to honor the collective effort of filmmaking. And just like with Brando, Widmark opted out. He kept his distance, silently preserving the integrity of his own performance, never offering respect where he felt it was squandered. Richard Widmark never confronted Kirk Douglas head-on. After one particularly chaotic scene, he leaned toward a colleague and murmured, just loud enough to carry, "There's only room for one storm in a scene." The message was clear. Widmark refused to compete for attention or energy. From that moment, he grew increasingly distant whenever Douglas escalated a scene beyond what had been carefully rehearsed. Widmark didn't fight fire with fire. He didn't shout louder or gesture more dramatically. Instead, he held steady, controlled, almost unervingly so. The contrast made Douglas's intensity appear excessive, even desperate. The consequences were quiet but final. Widmark began turning down projects whenever Douglas was involved, no matter how appealing the role. There were no public disputes, no bitter interviews. He simply excised Douglas from his professional life. To Widmark, Douglas wasn't merely reckless or difficult. He represented something deeper, a performer who equated dominance with strength. Hollywood celebrated that illusion. Widmark quietly rejected it, never again choosing to share a scene, a frame, or a set with him. So, what does this reveal about Hollywood's golden age? Were these actors truly monsters, or were they shaped by a system that rewarded cruelty and unchecked power? Which name on Widmark's private list surprises you most? And would such behavior survive in today's industry? Share your thoughts below. For more hidden tales from Hollywood's shadowed corners, subscribe, turn on notifications, and prepare to uncover the secrets that history almost forgot.